بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وآله وصحبه ومن والاه. اللهم اغفر لنا وتب علينا وارحمنا. اللهم طهر قلوبنا. اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين لك في توحيدنا إياك. اللهم اجعلنا من الصادقين العارفين في توحيدنا إياك. اللهم اجعلنا نعبدك ولا نشرك اللهم اجعلنا نعبدك ولا نشرك بك شيئا يا أرحم الراحمين يا رب العالمين، وثبتنا على ذلك إلى يوم ملقاك، واحشرنا على ذلك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the most sincere of tawheed to Him Azza wa Jal. And He subhanahu wa ta'ala excuse me, and may He subhanahu wa ta'ala make us ones who live in tawheed, and who, when He takes us to Him, He takes us to Him in the most sincere of tawheed, and that when He resurrects us, He resurrects us in that state. برحمته عز وجل ومنه. My brothers and sisters, just a short reflection, inshallah ta'ala, from Surat Al Ankabut, the spider. Allah says in that surah, towards the end, مثل الذين اتخذوا من دون الله أولياء كمثل العنكبوت اتخذت بيتا. The parable of those who invoke or worship or solicit other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, allies, beloved ones, awliya, other creatures, and everything else other than Allah is a creature. Those who take other creatures as their awliya, in other words, those to whom they give their love and their complete devotion and their worship and their full obedience regardless. He says subhanahu wa ta'ala, the parable of those is like the parable of a spider who built for itself a web or bait, where it says bait, which means what? A house, a shelter. And the shelter of a spider relative to man is very, very weak, very, very, very fragile. It has no help for the spider from man. وَتَعَالَى اللَّهُ عَنِ الْأَمْثَالِ. May Allah be exalted from analogies. All creation relative to Allah is like this parable. No matter what human beings take for themselves as allies to worship and to love other than the divine God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is as though they are running to find shelter and refuge in the house of a spider from a human being. وَتَعَالَى اللَّهُ عَنِ الْأَمْثَالِ وَالْأَشْبَاهِ. In other words, my dear sisters and brothers, our deeds, our actions, no matter how much we praise them or others celebrate them for us or praise us for them, if those are not consistent with the tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it is like somebody having surrounded himself with the web of a spider, seeking shelter and fortifying himself against the onslaught, let's say, of an army, a human army. At-tawheed, 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 my dear sisters and brothers. I remind you and myself of the tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jal, and to keep learning more about that, and to keep asking Allah Azza wa Jal that our tawheed is not only academic or something we read in the books or traditional only, but a tawheed that resides in our qulub, the tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that we strive to live that tawheed in our everyday life. That means that every day I live, every moment I live, no matter what I do, if I am in that tawheed, meaning wahid, 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 subhanahu wa ta'ala, I am only concerned about what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala think of me. Is Allah satisfied or not? In anything I do, in any project I have, in any attitude, under any circumstance, that's what tawheed requires. Whether I am at work, at home, at school, in the streets, angry, pleased, displeased, under all circumstances. The tawheed requires that I am aware of Allah Azza wa Jal and what is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's what is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's view? This is not the right word. What is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hukm relative to what I am feeling, what I am doing? That's what tawheed requires, my dear sisters and brothers. In the beginning of that surah, Allah tells us, since we are going to be tested in this life we cannot live this life without struggle, without pain, without problems, without difficulties, without challenges of all sorts. Emotional, psychological, family, work, financial, monetary, economic, social, health-wise, power-wise, poverty, you name them, there will be those things. So Allah says, in this context of tawheed, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, alif lam mim, أحسب الناس أن يتركوا أن يقولوا آمنا وهم لا يفتنون. Alif lam mim, only Allah knows what alif lam mim ultimately and really means. There are many sayings about that. Nobody knows exactly what it means. Allah knows, and His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and maybe sometimes some of the special awliya might have a possible understanding of what that might completely mean. Allah ta'ala alam. أحسب الناس أن يتركوا. Do human beings think that they're going to be left to say, we believe, I am wahid, I am mu'min? Do they think they're going to be left to say that, to claim that, without being tested, without being tried, without being subjected to fitan, to tribulations, to hardships of all sorts, as I mentioned? وَلَقَدْ فَتَنَّا الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ. We have subjected to all of that those who were before them. That's the sunnah of Allah in His creation. فَلَيَعْلَمَنَّ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ صَدَقُوا وَلَيَعْلَمَنَّ الْكَاذِبِينَ. So Allah is telling us, and that's the means by which the truthful is exposed and the liar is exposed. Truthful meaning what? Those who claim tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jal, Iman in Allah Azza wa Jal, and tawheed in Allah Azza wa Jal. As I mentioned earlier, tawheed means at every instant of my life, I am aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's control over everything. So, the person who claims that, when subjected to trials and tribulations, is he still aware that Allah is in control? Or changes his mind and oscillates here and there? He's okay when things are okay with him, or when things are troublesome, he doesn't have that much now iman, and that much commitment, and that much obedience to Allah Azza wa Jal, and that much goodness, and so on and so forth. وَلَيَعْلَمَنَّ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ صَدَقُوا وَلَيَعْلَمَنَّ الْكَاذِبِينَ. The person who consistently continues under hardship to continue in tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jal, in obedience of Allah Azza wa Jal, no matter what, whether in hardship or in prosperity, that's a person is solid. And the person who only when things are good and well for him or her in the way he or she likes, then that person is a kadhib. That person is a liar in his claim of tawheed and iman. May Allah Azza wa Jal protect us. May Allah Azza wa Jal shield us. May Allah Azza wa Jal forgive us. May Allah Azza wa Jal pardon us. May Allah Azza wa Jal grant us the energy of true believers, of true muwahidun, of those whose actions are stronger than their words, those whose response to the trials and tribulations of life are more truthful than their words. Ya Rabb, but we ask you, Ya Allah, not to subject us to tribulations and hardships. We are not by this asking hardships and tribulations, but asking for your aun, for your help, Ya Allah. Allahumma innaka afoon tuhibbul afwa fa'fu anna. Allahumma afu anna wa afina. Allahumma afu anna wa afina. Allahumma afu anna wa afina. واختم لنا بالسعادة برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين يا رب العالمين. وصل اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله الطاهرين وأصحابه الميامين التابعين لهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين.